So by now, we're all aware of Madonna's antics over the years. Needless to say, I am not a fan, but at the end of the day, we are here for the music, so that's the topic we're going to stick with. For my part, I have always loved Madonna's music. I can confidently say that I'm fairly familiar with both her classic and her modern songs. With that being said though, before listening to her 1994 album Bedtime Stories, the only other album of hers that I've heard in full was her 2005 album Confessions on a Dance Floor. And much like everyone else, I really love that one. It was the perfect throwback to her roots and inspirations as an artist. However, I love Bedtime Stories for the complete opposite reason. But before I get ahead of myself, let's properly dive into the album. So by this point of Madonna's career, she has completely moved away from the cutesy bubblegum pop sound that she was known for in the 80s. Going into the 90s, however, she wanted to experiment with erotica and got a lot of heavy criticism for it. So Bedtime Stories is actually a direct response to that. What I find so funny about this is that remembering her songs from the 80s, quite a few of them actually always had a touch of sensuality to them. It's just that by this point, she was being more open about it. And mind you, she was far from the only celebrity or artist to create or be a part of any sort of erotic work. But I suppose due to her being the mainstream queen of pop, she had to face way more scrutiny as a result. Now, her response with this album is not entirely what you might be thinking. It is not really an apology. The lyrics are still suggestive. It's just that they're approaching intimacy from a genuine, sympathetic, and vulnerable place. And regardless of the topic, she would take this angle even further in her next album that came out in 1998, Ray of Light, which is one of the few that informed the landscape of modern pop music. And mind you, that was when she was starting to take her vocal training seriously, since she was doing the film Evita. And look, we are all aware that Madonna was never the strongest vocalist. However, she is nevertheless a natural-born performer and a character with the ability to morph into many different roles as needed. Even with Bedtime Stories, I was really impressed by her putting on different voices according to the mood that she wanted to convey in each song. Also, the music itself is very British. It has a distinct approach to R&B, trip-hop, and dub. If you're at all familiar with Soul to Soul, Massive Attack, or even any of the British acts that I've personally covered on this channel, none of these tracks should come as a surprise to you. And even though she was willing to tone down her image for the sake of her audience, she still wasn't about to give us any sort of dreamy sugarcoating, despite the name of the album and the aesthetic of her cover art. She just wasn't going to fake it, and I have to applaud her for that. The tracks overall are nevertheless a really nice and easy listen, with a little bit of funk in there. It starts off strong with Survival and ends off strong with Take a Bow. In fact, even if it is a little on the nose, that probably is one of the best ways to effectively cap off an album. And I do appreciate the fact that while, yes, the songs are following a particular formula, each one has its own take on it. So you do still end up getting a kind of a unique experience. If you're someone who thought that Madonna's songs in the 80s were too cheesy, that her experimental era was too cringy and forced, or that her modern songs are just tough to get into, I really do think that you should give Bedtime Stories a chance. and get to experience a mellowed out Madonna before things gradually started going off the rails again. And that about does it for this entry. Thank you so much for listening. Next time, we're going to be looking at a trilogy of records by an artist that was my greatest inspiration throughout middle and high school. See you then!